HD, Minneapolis, and on the web at KFAI.org. Radio Without Boundaries for over 43 years. We're in the middle of our fall member drive. We'll be going to conversations with Al McFarlane shortly, but I wanted to give a chance to thank some of the folks who've donated here in the last couple hours. Thank you to Jinx and Greg, to Michael out there in Minneapolis, Amy, Xenia, yet another Michael, Jonathan, Chase. It's never too late to give to your favorite radio station, the radio station that brings you this program every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Remotely here, we're pumping in Mr. McFarlane from his remote home base there. You can call and donate now at 612-375-9030 or on the web at kfai.org. We'll be bringing you that.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Glad to be here. And please do support KFAI. This broadcast station, I call it more than that. I call it a work. This is an important work in our community, an important work for our people. And we really, really, really depend on you, the listener, and now the viewers on our social media to support this important work. So I invite you to join. Be a member of the KFAI family, the KFAI community, and take advantage of the wonderful premiums we have. We've got a great program today, as always. I call it Robust Conversation. I'm pleased to begin the program talking to my friends at Juxtaposition Arts. Kristen Murray is here. And also on the phone, I believe I have Catherine Simpson. Catherine, are you there? And she was here a minute ago. Maybe we've lost her, but she'll come back. Catherine Simpson, Katie M. Simpson is the president of Bank of America for the Midwest or Minneapolis and St. Paul market. And what caught my attention a little while back was a press release, which we turned into a story at Insight News, that said Bank of America was going to award $1 million, a grant of $1 million to Juxtaposition Arts, the phenomenal creative heartbeat of North Minneapolis. And so I said, this has got to be something I talk about. I reached out to Bank of America, and Katie Simpson is here to talk about that. I also reached out to Juxta, and Kristen Murray is here to talk about their organization. We might have some technical issues with it because Katie was in and out. Kristen, let me start with you. Good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Hi, Mr. McFarlane. Thank you so much for having us on today.
No, I'm not hearing you, but that could be an issue on my end. Let me try to fix that here with my headsets. But to start with, take a minute to talk about Juxtaposition Arts. What is the organization? How does it work?
Absolutely. Juxtaposition Arts is a 26-year-old now Black-founded, Black-led organization here on the north side of Minneapolis at the corner of Emerson and Broadway. We are a youth-staffed art and design center. We offer both introductory programs in free art education classes and workshops that then can lead into paid apprenticeships for young people between the ages of 14 and 22. And those apprenticeships allow young people to work and learn alongside practicing artists and designers in visual arts, in graphic design, textiles and screen printing, and environmental design and urban planning and community engagement. Build skills, explore different career and educational pathways, and work on real projects for our community, for our city, for our region, while building those skills.
And you have a broader vision. I mean, the vision obviously is serving and supporting individuals, but one could say to what end? And I think there's a clear vision in your leadership in the life and work of Roger Cummings and Deanna Cummings, and you and the entire staff. Talk about that big vision for Juxtaposition Arts. And I see Katie Simpson's back. We'll get her in 1 second. Katie, thank you for being here. But talk about that quickly, if you would, Kristen.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm just coming out of a meeting earlier today with leadership at Juxta, and as we were talking about the vision for the organization, which I think is really, which we're, as we think about the campus here at Emerson and Broadway for the next 25 years and the new art center we're building, it's really about creating the space for this vision. But we know that the why of what we do is really because of this context we're in, where theft of intellectual property and theft of cultural production of Black artists and Black creatives is the history, and it is the world that we're living in. And so we are all about how to create economic justice and equitable representation for Black artists, Black young people who are creative and are, about building new things, creating their vision in the world, building their communities, building what they want to see in the world. And so, that's what we're really about.
Great. Well, Katie Simpson is here. Katie, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I can tell you that I was just flabbergasted in a positive and smiling way when I read the press release saying that Bank of America was going to make a grant to Juxta for $1 million. How did that come about?
So thank you first for having us. And we are so proud Bank of America is to support Juxtaposition Arts. We've been working with Juxtaposition Arts for years. Mm-hmm. And so our partnership and our common vision has really led to this $1 million investment that Bank of America has made to Juxtaposition Arts Legacy Campaign. As we had touched upon earlier in terms of job creation, one of the things that we took a look at is in 2010, Juxtaposition had 20 youth part-time summer jobs. And today there's over 80 youth and 30 artists year-round that are employed by Juxtaposition Arts. And this really, again, falls in line with our vision of helping create jobs in our community, helping to align with our 5-year, $1.2 billion racial equality commitment and economic opportunity commitment. And we are just thrilled to continue to deepen the relationship between Bank of America and Juxtaposition Arts.
Yeah, Bank of America is relatively new in the Twin Cities marketplace. Can you say a little bit about your organization for people that don't know you locally here?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. So, sure. As the president of Bank of America, we're here to grow within the community. When we think about that, we think of our 8 lines of business that grow here, and that includes our consumer bank, our commercial banking, our large corporate, and our private wealth arms in the private bank and Merrill Lynch. And with that, we have come in 6 years ago. When we were talking about how to enter into a community, our whole goal is to be here to help our community thrive. And when our community thrives, so do we. And that's the approach that we take with everything that we do. So we talk about making everyone's financial lives better. And we do it through those lens of those business units. But then we also do so much as it relates to the community and working closely with community partners such as Juxtaposition Arts to really try to improve the community around us, to really drive forth that conversation about racial equality and economic opportunity for all. And that is what our purpose is that we've set out and we started executing on just about 6 years ago.
How did the unrest in Minneapolis impact your vision, your work? I'll ask this to both you and Kristen. I mean, I can tell you that as a newspaper person, obviously our business was impacted. I don't know anybody who wasn't personally or in their organization or cultural space impacted in some way. And I think most of us were impacted outside of being, angry at the unfolding of events. We were motivated to do better and be better. Kristen, how did that impact you all as educators and as community builders at Juxtaposition?
I think in a few ways. I mean, I think first of all, it felt even more vital to create that space for young people to come together, to be in community, to create, to respond in whatever way, or discuss, in whatever way felt right to them, but to provide that creative and connective space for young artists. I think and in addition, we have our skatable art plaza on the corner, but for space for community, and for space where community sees itself reflected back, right? So to create that space and maintain that space. And then I think it just made us really feel the need to just double down on this vision for the next 25 years, and maintaining that space, maintaining of education, of creating opportunity, and really being even ever more bold, but not backing away from it, but really doubling down. A real sense of urgency, I would say.
Awesome.
To create that.
Katie, thoughts? I'm going to wrap it up here. But what kind of what's the right word? Additional energy has the bank discovered in its focus on, creating diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Absolutely. So I have to tell you, as Minneapolis-St. Paul is my adopted hometown now, this was not only did I have anger, but I had sadness that we became the epicenter of this conversation. And so what Bank of America thinks about is, how can we do things better, quicker, faster, and differently? So leveraging that creativity component to say, how can we change what is here today? And so with that, with all of that energy behind us, we have committed to more than 1.2 million in awards that have impacted nonprofits. We are sitting here, we have come out and we have said we are going to spend over the course of 5 years $1.25 billion on racial equality and economic opportunity commitment.
Nationwide? Nationwide, Katie?
Nationwide.
Great.
That is correct. Nationwide. And some of the things that we're thinking about doing is not only committing to what we've committed to in the past, but what can we do that's even more? What can we do that's even more creative? Just recently, we announced, along with several other financial companies, the support of bringing First Independence Bank to the Twin Cities. And it's examples like that Bank of America is leaning into, to say, what can we do that we've done in the past that's been successful, and what can we do more in the future that is slightly different? And so I have to just agree with Kristen. I mean, the energy, the doubling down, that is what we are here to do. We are here to make a real change, and the real change has to be now.
Listen, Katie Simpson, thank you so much. Kristen Murray at Juxta, thank you so much. Let me acknowledge and disclose that Bank of America is a customer of mine. You are an advertiser at Insight News. We thank you for the business. But in the spirit of transparency, I want to say that. And I want to thank you for being a customer, for being engaged with Black businesses like Insight News, with organizations like Juxta. We think that's what this is all about. Thank you both so very much, and we'll talk to you again. You're both welcome to come back as often as you wish to talk about your work, your commitment to community. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All righty. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Great beginning interview. We've got a lot more to unpack for you in the course of the next few minutes. I think my next guest is backstage, ready to come on to talk about one of the ballot questions. Carl Smith. Carl, good afternoon. How are you? Cecil Smith, I'm sorry. Cecil.
Hi. Hi, Al. Good to be with you.
Yeah, let me ask you to introduce yourself. I know that we're going to talk about, and I've been doing this almost every day for the past 2 or 3 weeks, talking to candidates for office in Minneapolis and people who are pro and con on the 3 ballot questions on the city of Minneapolis. I've invited you here to talk about the ballot question number 3, which has to do with rent control. And you're with a group of citizens who are opposed to the measure. Let me ask you to introduce yourself, sort of your background, and who do you speak for, and who do you stand with in trying to educate the public on a perspective and to encourage a certain action by voters in this upcoming election.
Yeah, well, thanks for the opportunity, Al, and it's great to be with you and with your subscribers and listeners. I'm Cecil Smith. I have 2 day jobs, actually. My one day job is I'm president and CEO of the Minnesota Multi-Housing Association. And I came to this role because of my other day job, which is I'm an owner and operator of multi-housing in Minneapolis, where I live. And it's where I bought my first duplex that I lived in and rented out and started building a small real estate portfolio as a immigrant entrepreneur. I'm originally from New Zealand and have been here in Minneapolis for 30 years. And really engaged on housing issues. And that brought us to the ballot question that came into being in Minneapolis on August 20th, when the council authorized the ballot question. And we started engaging in the debate around rent control. And I'm here today representing the Sensible Housing Ballot Committee. I chair the Sensible Housing Ballot Committee, but it has grown into a coalition of labor and business, housing industry experts who are really alarmed that rent control might come to the Midwest, because it's only in the coasts that we have rent control. We would be the first cities to engage in rent control.
Let's do rent control 101. Let's define what rent control is for people that don't know or aren't familiar with it. And I'm going to ask you, though you have a position, to lay out the pros and the cons. My goal is to educate and to help people make informed decisions. I think that's your goal as well.
It is.
You simply want people to be clear on what and why. So give people a background. Why are we having this discussion? And what is it we are being asked to look at, or the city is looking at doing?
Look, we're having this discussion because we have some very serious housing challenges. We have housing affordability challenges. We have a lack of housing opportunity. And I'm not just talking about apartments. I'm talking about a broad spectrum of housing opportunities that can go from senior housing with supportive services for seniors and nursing home care, all the way to apartments in the middle and transitional housing and supportive housing for folks who are in recovery from all kinds of things. We need more housing. So we have a housing affordability challenge and a housing supply challenge, and by the laws of economics, those two things are generally linked together. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the homelessness challenge, which is, a very serious problem, but a very as complicated as the housing challenge. And many people often link those two directly. Well, if we just had enough apartments, all of these neighbors of ours and fellow residents of our city who are homeless, that we would cure that. Well, it's not. That's a lot more. And we're here to talk about rent control today. There's just a lot of conversations to be had about housing.
This is a great approach, Cecil. I mean, it's better to talk broadly about all the things, because it's not simple. It's not simple. And I think that you are attempting to be expansive in saying that these are all the things on people's minds, and different things have different motivations and challenges and reasons why and why not to. So thank you for the tact that you've taken. Don't feel uncomfortable in stretching out. Okay, go ahead.
So we have So that's what's brought us to this conversation about rent control, because there is a viewpoint by the proponents that, well, this is a solution. And the Sensible Housing Ballot Committee, and I personally believe strongly that it's not the solution. It's the wrong solution to the problem. Rent control doesn't create a single unit of housing, and rent control does not remove the financial burden that people are already facing trying to pay rent every month. It doesn't cure that. It doesn't cure any of the present problems that we have with lack of supply or lack of affordability. Now, I will agree, rent control will help existing renters going forward with moderating rent increases.
Mm-hmm.
There are winners and losers in every economic policy. But we have to think about the future. How will we navigate ourselves out of this housing crisis towards solutions? And rent control actually puts more impediments in the way, because, well, we don't know what the specific policy would be in Minneapolis, because that's not been illuminated yet in this debate. The proponents are pointing very directly towards St. Paul and the St. Paul policy that's on the ballot in St. Paul. And the St. Paul policy that is on the ballot is 3% without any inflationary factor, which is a very rigid policy. There's hardly anywhere in the country that imagines rent control without an inflationary factor.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exempt any housing stock. Brand new developments, 100-year-old properties, single-family homes, 100-unit buildings, affordable housing, market rate housing, everything's included. Very broad capture for rent control, more broad than any other city in the country. And then it has vacancy control, which is a very rarely used approach. Most states and cities that have rent control have what they call vacancy control. What vacancy control says, when the resident who has the rent controlled unit vacates the apartment, the owner or manager has the ability to reset the rent to what is the market price. And the process starts all over again with the new renter enjoying the rent control on future rent increases. Vacancy control, as the St. Paul ballot measure proposes, says it's always 3%. That's the most it can ever be raised. Whether it's occupied for years, it's still a 3% annual increase that you're capped at. Mm-hmm. So this is very, very strict. And the proponents in Minneapolis are pointing to the proposal that's on the ballot in St. Paul and saying that's what we should do. The detrimental effects of that. So we mentioned what the benefits are to the existing renters. Mm-hmm. But the detrimental effects start happening, which is we don't get any new construction or very little new construction occurring. We need housing. Because why would an investor build a new building where they've got all kinds of future expense risk, like interest rates rising, inflation, utility costs, property taxes, insurance, all increasing, but their income is capped? Mm-hmm. You're asking a developer to say, well, okay, your income is capped, but the expenses are unbounded. It's a very risky proposition.
Yeah.
And when you can take your resources to another city, another jurisdiction, and make a similar investment, it's going to go elsewhere. The market acts rationally and says, okay, where's the least risk? And they'll go where the least risk is. So it deters new investment in the housing supply that we desperately need. Then we get the effect on the existing rental housing stock. An owner may say, you know what? We're going to convert the apartment building to condos. We're going to sell off these units. We can make a lot of money selling them off. We lose rental housing, which exacerbates the availability of rental housing that we desperately need.
Mm-hmm.
Or an owner says, you know what? Looks like we've got some inflation. I'm not going to do any capital investment this year. I'm putting off that new roof. I'm not going to paint. I'm going to wait. The windows are breaking, falling apart. But you know what? We'll patch them and we'll get through another year. You reduce the quality of housing long term. So these are the well-documented effects of rent control. And the thing about the St. Paul proposal is it's never been that strict. So we don't even have a case study to compare how bad it could end up being in St. Paul. So, well, that may sound alarmist. It just is. It's like, well, if we've seen detrimental effects with rent control in other cities where San Francisco, loss of rental housing stock, New York, decline in the quality of housing stock, what will it be in St. Paul? What will it be in Minneapolis if we adopt something similar? And we can't afford to go down that road. The energy and effort has to be focused on how do we make housing more affordable? How do we add more housing? Those are the real solutions.
So you're thinking that when it comes to this question on the ballot, you are inviting voters to oppose it.
We're urging voters, vote no on question 1 in St. Paul, vote no on question 3 in Minneapolis. We need to be asking our policymakers, we need to be asking civic leaders, let's find real solutions, the right solutions that are going to work to the housing challenge that we have. And that's what I'm actually excited about, seeing this coalition coming together of the construction trade unions, the housing industry, business interests. I've been traveling around Minnesota this year because our housing challenge is not unique.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it in Wilmer. I've heard it in Rochester. I've heard it in Duluth. I've heard it in Mankato. We need more housing. How do we build more housing? How do we make housing more affordable? Every community is suffering under this, and it's hurting our economy because we have jobs that are available. In St. Cloud, there's one healthcare provider alone that has 10,000 open positions.
Wow.
But there's no housing for their workers that they need. So, it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? We've got to figure out how to build the housing, because if we don't have the housing, then are the jobs really there? But we have the jobs, which we could fill. But if we had the housing, they would really be real jobs. So, this is why it's going to take a concerted effort. We need statewide leadership on this. We need regional leadership. It can't just be the individual cities trying to piecemeal this together with the limited resources that even cities have, even big cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul that need thousands of affordable housing units constructed, and our affordable housing trust funds are just a drop in the bucket.
And so for ordinary consumers, Cecil, the concern is there is a real concern about rent increases. You're saying that's kind of short term, even for the consumer. On the one hand, it makes sense for someone to say, it would be awesome if I could know that my rent wouldn't increase year after year, but for so much, I can plan for that. On the other hand, you're saying that capping of rents in the long run disserves the broad community of residents, because it means we won't have the capital to bring more housing into the market or to maintain and improve existing housing. And so it sets the housing resource or asset in a sort of a downward orientation that disadvantages everyone long term. Am I saying that properly?
You're absolutely right.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for being here. And over the week, we'll be inviting other people from other points of view to join the conversation as well. But your voice is critical. It's important. I'll let you make one more appeal to the voters before you leave us today, Cecil Smith.
Well, I appreciated you started out with, that we want to educate voters. And that's been one of the core values of our campaign in the Sensible Housing Ballot Committee, is to educate voters, to help them understand what looks good on first blush. If you think twice about it, it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah, I got to remember back to Econ 101, right? This is not going to work. So vote no on question 1 in St. Paul, vote no on question 3 in Minneapolis. And hopefully we can count on the support of the voters out there so that we can move forward towards the housing solutions that are really going to work for our cities.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Al.
I'm Al McFarlane. You're listening to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Cecil Smith is the president and CEO at Minnesota Multi-Housing Association and is looking for you to react, to vote in the upcoming elections next week. Let me move on to my next guest today. And I was looking at a press release a few days ago at Insight and came across an announcement of a grant opportunity. The announcement said calling all change makers, and it announced what's called social impact grants of up to $5,000 available to develop or start your initiatives. And what was surprising and cool about this is that it came from the consulate of Israel, the consulate general of Israel to the Midwest. So I'm pleased to have the Deputy Consul General with me today. Dr. Daniel Ashheim is here. He is serving as Deputy Consul General at the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. He was appointed to this Chicago-based post in September of 2020, where he assumed the role as consul for public diplomacy, serving as a spokesperson for the consulate's 9-state Midwestern region. I've got a very impressive resume about him. I'm not going to read it. I'll ask him about it over the course of this conversation, but it's my pleasure to have you on the conversation. Dr. Ashheim, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Al, for inviting us. And we were very excited that you saw it immediately after we sent it out. So I hope.
I saw it within minutes, and I said, boy, this is what intrigued me was that it was in my layman's viewpoint, you can correct me, this is a work of the government of Israel, or an extension of the government of Israel, talking about and promoting diversity and inclusion. I was surprised. So I started with that and I reached out immediately. Let's talk about this. So tell me about it.
Great. So first of all, it's very important for us to emphasize the state of Israel and the United States. We have a long-term partnership, which is based on values, based on many, many different things. But people sometimes forget that besides the political ties, security ties, and the other diplomatic ties, we really try and build people-to-people relationships. And for Israel, it's number one priority to try and reach out to communities, to friends, and really encourage programs that are connecting, as you say, diversity, equity, inclusion. This is part of the Israeli goal in order to reach out to as many partners on the ground. So really, we are encouraging through this grant program, social activists, people who want to make change in their communities, whether in food security, equity, whether it's in environmental issues, in diversity, social justice issues, public health, all of these fields, we are saying we are here to help you, help your communities. We are partnering with you. We are here as the State of Israel, as the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. We are reaching out especially to our friends in Minnesota. And we are giving priority to applicants from the state of Minnesota. We're giving up to $5,000 grants for small organizations, medium-sized organizations. We want grassroots work, and we want to promote it because Israel believes in diversity. Israel is a diverse society, and as President Biden just said, this is the most diverse government in Israeli history, and we're implementing that on the ground here.
What's been the reaction so far? Number one, has this initiative been done before, or is this new?
So as far as I know, it's the first time that we are doing it, for sure, the Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest. Nevertheless, I do not know of the exact same program, and this is a pilot program. So we are very, very excited. I'm excited both on a personal level, on an institutional level, and I believe that this is really building true partnership between the people. And we've got great responses coming out, actually, for many Midwestern states asking, is it only for the people in Minnesota? We said not only, but we are giving priority because we think there are so many potential programs and projects that we heard from people, whether with the African American community, whether with the Hispanic community, whether with just people who would like to implement programs in environmental health. And it's very important for me to say, for the state of Israel, the relationship with the African American community, of course, there are long-term history, ties between the Jewish people and the African American, but we are saying something very important here. Mm-hmm. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, when he walked with Rabbi Heschel in the civil rights movement, it's very nice, very important, but that's history. We are saying we are here now. We are here not only to discuss history, but look at the future together, hand in hand, and do it not by only lip service, but actual things on the ground. And therefore, we came up with this initiative. This is one thing that we're doing. We're working also in Detroit, in Illinois, and Wisconsin on other programs with the community, together with the community. We are working side by side with them. And here we are really calling on people who don't have a connection to Israel, who do have a connection, who don't know anything about Israel. All of it is okay. We are here to help you in your goals and your tasks.
Tell me your background. You've got a fascinating background. I looked in your bio. It says you were once the concierge at the hotel, King David Hotel in Jerusalem, right? And how do you get from there to here as a PhD educator and leader and a deputy consul general?
You know, Al, thank you for asking. I get that asked quite often. And what I always say, that was the best preparation I could get to the diplomatic world. And I really believe in that. I served 5 years at the concierge at one of the top hotels in the world, it's considered. We had presidents, kings, queens, Hollywood stars. But that's one part. But you're also working with all the system. You work with the taxi drivers, with the chefs, with the restaurant, with everything that needs to be done. And I think you learn diplomacy, you learn political work, you learn how to move on with projects. And then before I came here, I also served 2 years as a deputy Israeli ambassador to Senegal, West Africa, responsible for 5 sub-Saharan countries, most of them Muslim, which was a fascinating, challenging, interesting experience as an Israeli diplomat. And a lot of the initiatives we did there, working together with the population to understand what are their needs and then address them, is something that you need to be very humble and not tell the other side you know what's better for them, but we work together with them. And this is another part of this initiative, coming to the people of Minnesota, telling them what is that you need and how can we be of help, and not us telling them what we think they need, but we're working together as partners on this.
You might have caught the first part of the program, Dr. Ashheim, but I talked with the Midwest or the Minnesota president of Bank of America, and I raised the question about the impact of the George Floyd incident on that bank's relationship with the Black community, and also their partner organization and community, an arts organization called Juxtaposition Arts. And I want to raise the same question in general to you. I'm curious about how the world looked at George Floyd and how and whether what happened here informs in any way your decision, your desire to go deeper, go further, or to go back to where you've already created, pathways in promoting and lifting up equality, access. I say that to say I acknowledge the critical and important and historical relationships between Black Americans and Jewish Americans in the civil rights movement. Foundational, critical, important. I think we went through periods where we were closer and then farther apart and closer again. But I think at the core of it was a common vision of what human possibility and aspiration could be, and a commitment to that for all human beings. What are your thoughts?
Thank you for the question, Al. It's a very important point that we are doing this for the sake of humanity. And I think humanitarian issues and the justice for every person, regardless of his race, her race, gender, religion, all of that, every human is born human, and we are all born equal. And I actually personally visited Minneapolis and St. Paul 3 months ago. And I also visited the site of George Floyd to see what is the remembrance thing. And then from my conversations with people, it was really something that was there. But it was not only George Floyd as the incident, but as you mentioned, Al, this is a much bigger thing. And people talk to me about what is problematic for them. What are their difficulties in life, whether it's connected to food security, healthcare, diversity, education gaps, things that they felt that these are their challenges. And we work on all levels to provide what Israel can do to assist with our know-how, together with local community leaders, whether it's here, again, as I mentioned, in Illinois, we're working in Bronzeville, South Chicago, with the African-American Pastor Harris, the leaders of the community, with trauma resilience and how to build community resilience, trauma treatment, post-traumatic treatment, and more. And from understanding these are humanitarian reasons, and the state of Israel emphasizes that and really believes that the way we can all, as humanity, overcome these issues is using our know-hows, every country's added value, every population. So Israel, I can't say that we know better than you do, or you know better than us. I think everyone have their different angles and can assist in order to develop the best things for humanity through really being an inclusive society that really embraces diversity. And this is part of this grant. So I think based on what you said, I said we want to work everywhere. We'll continue. It's not because of George Floyd. We worked before also in Minnesota, and we worked with other Midwestern states. But I think it's time together to work as groups. And more we work together, the united we are, the more we can develop ourselves. And I call all of you to apply, wherever you know, to spread the word.
Let people know how to apply. We got a few minutes more. I don't know how your time is, but I want to spend more time with you. Okay, great. I want to spend more time. I'm enjoying the conversation, first of all, and I thank you for being here. I thank and applaud you for the initiative. I'm talking to Dr. Daniel Eschheim. He's the Deputy Consulate General of Israel to the Midwest, and his office in Chicago serves 9 Midwestern states, including Minnesota. And we're here because I got a press release about the initiative to support social impact initiatives. They've created a social impact grant, and they're inviting people in the 9-state region, but particularly in Minnesota. They emphasize Minnesota, to apply for funding for up to $5,000 of programs committed to creating social impact in new ways or through maintaining existing social programs. And the social impact grant recipients have the opportunity to create a global network of change makers across various social issues. And I wanted Dr. Ashton to let people know how they apply. Who do they reach out to and bring their idea forward?
So please, Al, call me Daniel. So thank you very much for the question again. So who we are trying to reach out. First of all, we are sending it to every partner organization that we've worked with before. We believe in long-term sustainable partnerships. Not only, we don't like the hit and run, sometimes coming, saying we are doing part, we really want to do long-term change. So we're starting with existing partners that we know. We're asking everyone we know in Minnesota really to spread the word, to identify people who they know are leaders in their community, people who really are change makers and are aspiring to become change makers, whether they're a 16-year-old in high school, whether they're already an established non-governmental organization, whether they're a certified 501 non-profit organization status. We are trying to reach out and really find those who want to make change and improve their societies, improve their life in any of the fields that I mentioned, and you read it correctly before. So we're really focusing on advancing and mitigating the effects of these social issues: environment, public health, food security, education, diversity, social justice, and all of these topics. So whoever thinks they are relevant or they know someone, please, please, please apply. We can guarantee that we'll look into it. There's nothing already scheduled in advance. It's completely open. And the best ones, the things that we see the most potential in, are those who will get the grants.
You mentioned that you were in Senegal. You came here from Dakar, Senegal. You worked for 2 years, I think, representing the nation of Israel in a region of several African countries. And I was curious when you said that a number of the countries that you connected with were Muslim countries. How did that go? What were the challenges of being an Israeli and working with, creating a diplomatic relationship with Muslim countries in West Africa?
I think it was a phenomenal experience. And I think that's something that it's so hard to describe, because the differences between, for many people, they say, you're served in Africa. They tell me, yeah, I have a friend in South Africa. I tell them that it's closer to fly to New York from Senegal than to South Africa from Senegal. It's a huge continent. And even in our jurisdiction, of the 5 countries that I served, we had a Gambia. It's a tiny country, 98% Muslim, in the middle of Senegal, that spoke English. It was a former British colony. As opposed to Senegal, it was French-speaking. And we had Guinea-Bissau, Portuguese-speaking. So each one had different characteristics. And I think the fascinating thing was to see also a very unique form of Islam, which is the Sufi Islam in West Africa, very inclusive, very promoting diversity and religious tolerance, which I think with a lot of the activities we did there were interreligious dialogues, bringing Muslims, Jews, and Christians sitting together and discussing. So we worked in the churches, we worked in the mosques, and we didn't have a synagogue there, but we brought rabbis to come in for discussions. And I think to see the challenges, of course, there are challenges sometimes. We need to tell the Israeli story to people who sometimes haven't heard so much or heard things which are not always the most positive. And we try to, again, form people-to-people relationship. One of our key efforts there we identified was, besides helping in agriculture, was using the Israeli know-how, helping building the ecosystem for innovation and making Senegal the startup nation of Africa by 2025. And we really worked very intensively to do that. And I'm very proud of our achievements there. And hopefully it will happen. But it's challenging, yes, but very, very rewarding.
So what's the political landscape or the social landscape that you're operating with now in this country? I looked at your newsletter online, just getting ready to talk to you. And one of the headlines was, is it possible to be progressive, liberal, progressive, and something else? But the picture was
pro-Israel, yes.
And pro-Israel, right. So how do you, I didn't read the article, but the headline intrigued me. How do you answer that question?
So Al, I'll make it short. The answer is yes, you can be. Nevertheless, the longer answer is that it's a very unfortunate situation. And this was done in the last, I would say, decade. That so-called pro-Palestinian organization, and I'm saying so-called because a lot of the times, unfortunately, we see that they're working harder on bashing Israel than promoting the rights of the Palestinian people, who I think their lives should be improved. So I feel for them, but I feel very sorry when people in the middle of Chicago, when Hamas terrorist organizations shoot rockets at Israeli civilians, Arabs or Jews alike, and we see Hamas flags in the middle of Chicago. This is something that worries me. And I say this is not helpful, not for the Palestinian people, and definitely not for peace. And we see that they tried building this false equation that you can either be progressive liberal and support Black Lives Matter, support LGBTQ rights, environment thing, but you cannot also support Israel. And we are saying on the contrary here. Israel is diversity. Diversity, you asked me, Al, before about the King David. Can I just give you a story about the King David? My
Please,
boss,
yeah, absolutely.
my boss was an Arab Christian woman. My two colleagues were Muslim men from East Jerusalem. I had another bellboy who was so-called a settler or a Jew, religious Jew, living in the West Bank. And it sounds like a beginning, and we had someone cleaning the dishes who came from Sudan. Now, it sounds like a beginning of a joke, but we were really best friends. But I don't want to glorify it. I just want to say that at times it was very challenging and difficult. But when you know what's going on in Israeli reality, and you see that people are living together in the government today of Israel. So this is a personal story, but look at Israeli government. Israeli government has religious and secular Jews, right and left wing. They have Druze, which is an ethnic minority, members of the coalition, and we are the first time in Israeli history that the head of the Interior Committee of the Israeli Parliament, the Knesset, is a member of the Islamic Brotherhood Party, Ra'am, which is the Arab party in the coalition, first time in Israeli history. So these are things that I think are not emphasized. We have an Ethiopian-born Jewish minister of absorption. So I think these are things just to show the people who are trying to portray Israel as some kind of a negative entity, to say Israel, the diversity in Israel is not only a soundbite, it's Israel. And this is important to tell everyone who listens to us today.
I had reached out to the consulate first about a year ago, I think, when I got a press release announcing that one of your team members, I can't remember her name, but I did look on your website and I saw a picture, but an African woman was part of your team in Chicago. And maybe she was arriving then. I don't remember the exact event, but the image captured my curiosity because I didn't think so much about an African presence in Israel, except for what I had read about the Ethiopians who had migrated to Israel and other groups, and there were African Americans who called themselves New or Hebrews, Black Hebrews. So I was curious to see how that happens and what reactions you get from people like me when they're curious about what that means.
So her name, yeah, actually, she was a great colleague of mine. She just left back to Israel in August. Her name is Consul Ariela Rada. She was born in Ethiopia, as you said, and she came here. And it's true, at times when we came and we heard slogans before that Israel is not diverse, that Israel is white people. And we tell them, look, saying Israel is white, European white people, more than 55% of Israeli population came from either the Middle East or Africa, North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunis, Iraq, Egypt, really all over the Middle East. So a lot of them are Jewish, not all are Jewish. And yes, so we had also the Ethiopian Jewish community who immigrated to Israel and are now members of parliament, are doctors, are everywhere in the foreign ministry. And the face that people ask us, are there Black Jews? We said, what do you mean? They're brown, they're Black. There are all kinds of Jews and all kinds of people who are not Jews living in Israel together. So I think the more exposure we have, the more conversations like you are bringing me on, Al, and I highly appreciate this opportunity that we are speaking not only after a military operation, but we are just talking about things that are interesting to the public in Minnesota and the people in Israel, the people to people that are care about their daily lives. And we are keen on talking about any topic, but I think it's very important to have these opportunities to really engage and ask the questions that are interesting for you. And for me also hearing them.
There was a kid that I knew from when he was a baby, a child. He's the son of one of my best friends and colleagues. The dad is Reverend Alfred Babington Johnson. He's a leader in the economic and cultural and spiritual community here. And his son, he told me, had converted to Judaism and has actually gone to Israel and is in Israel now. Wow. And I happened to look into Google. I think I Googled the son, and he's a rapper, but I think he's a lawyer. He was a football star athlete in college. And I think he went on to get a degree in law, but somehow decided to actually immigrate to Israel. And I don't have the full story, but I read a couple of things about him.
Al, I'll give you a secret.
Yes.
I'll tell you a secret just between us, me and you and the listeners. He was asked him that he used to come to the King David all the time for meetings. He was the coolest thing we have ever seen. Everyone loved. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Okay.
And his story was a phenomenal story that everyone should listen to. It's such an interesting story. The person is fascinating. He's fun. He's cool, and his personal story is so exciting. So you're exactly on that, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
And he's a brilliant young man. He has a family that is a legacy family here in Minnesota and actually in the country. But I'm excited for him, for his developing as an individual and his arriving at what is consciousness for him, right? And that arrival has placed him in Israel. I'm not sure if he's still there or not, but he's gained some visibility in the process. Listen, Daniel, I want to thank you so much for hanging out with me. I want to take the last couple of minutes again to invite people here in Minnesota to be aware of and apply for the social impact grant that you all are presenting.
So thank you very much, Al. And yes, as you just mentioned, we really call on all of you to apply. The way to apply, I don't know if you could put the link, Al. We sent you the link. If not, I'll just say to people, you can get into the Israel in Chicago, either Facebook page, either Instagram. It's in the highlights. You can follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. It's there. The link is there. There's a landing page with all the information. So Israel in Chicago, social media, or my personal profile, Daniel Asheim, you can find it there, or anyone at the consulate will be happy to share it with you if you have any questions. There's a person to ask all the questions there. So really, we invite you all to apply. Al, if you know someone, please send them to us.
I do know people, and I'm going to send them to you. I'm so glad to meet you, Dan. And let's make this the first, not the last of our conversations. I'm interested in just exploring, kicking it around, as we say, right? And just two guys talking, I think it's important. We need to do that. Thank you so very, very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Anytime, Al. Thank you very much. Take care, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, great. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Boy, the hour goes so fast. It's been a wonderful hour. I'm going to turn the program back over to the station. Mason, if you're there, or if Lady J is there, I know we're continuing our fund drive, our membership drive. So I want to take a minute or two to have you join me, Mason, or someone in the studio, to do a pledge rap, to ask our listeners, if you like this kind of conversation, I think it's rich. I think it's fun. I think it gives you a lot of information. I want to invite you to support this work, support the work of KFAI, this program, Conversations with Al McFarlane, by becoming a member. Mason, is it you there, or is it Lady J? Who's there in the studio?
It's Lady J.
Hey, Lady J, how are you?
I'm doing so good, Al. That conversation with Dan, and I should have seen his name in print because I'm reluctant to say it out loud without mispronouncing it. But that conversation was
Daniel Asheim.
That was marvelous.
Yeah.
And we both know people that would be eligible for that grant that are out there in the world, and they're go-getters, they're ready for a grant to help them do what it is they do, just like KFAI. And Al, how long have you been here with KFAI? How many years?
It's been a while. Like, I think I started with Sandra Gilliard. Remember her? You remember Sandy?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
So the show was first called, what was it called before?
Can't remember.
I can't remember either. It'll come to me in a minute.
As soon as we're off the air, we're going to remember,
Right. But that must have been in the 80s, in the 80s. Wow. When I started at KFAI. I actually started in radio at KQRS. I did a 10-minute show that aired like at 2 a.m. on Sunday or Saturday or something like that, maybe Sunday
10
morning.
minutes.
10 minutes.
What can you do in 10 minutes?
Well, cool. Check this out. I would tell my guests, we tape the show and then they play it at that time, once a week or something like that. But I tell my guests, we only have 10 minutes. So let's think as if this is the last 10 minutes of your life.
Wow.
Right? And so what is it that you want to say? What is it that you want to be clear about, that you want to make sure the world understood you, your point of view, your passion, your reason? Let's start with that and go up from there. And so it helped me hone my interviewing skills and my appreciation for the power of radio and the importance of this. So that's kind of my story. But that then coming with Sandy Gallier to be co-host of her show when she moved out of town, rebranding it as Conversations with Al McFarlane, and the rest, as they say, is history. We're out of time right now. Lady J, thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Al.
At the station. And again, let's try to get people to support us by becoming members right here at KFAI.
All they got to do is go to www.k.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with the bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. You better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough of all the rules you're breaking. We've had enough all the money you're making. We've had enough. No more life gets taken. We've had enough. This is the proclamation.
We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice.
We've had enough.
Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price.
We've had enough.
Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What? We've had enough.
So many gone